When a New Jersey family moved into a new home, they began receiving disturbing letters from someone who called themselves the Watcher.
We all have our theories, high school kids, who knows?
It was supposed to be their dream home, a beautiful Dutch colonial in the picturesque town of Westfield, New Jersey. In 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus had just closed on 657 Boulevard, excited to start a new chapter with their young children. But before they could even move in, an anonymous letter shattered their dreams and replaced them with a nightmare.
The first time I read the letters, I got goosebumps. I've never seen anything like it outside of kind of a horror movie.
The envelope arrived without a return address, the handwriting neat but unsettling. Inside, a message that made their blood run cold. Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. Derek stood frozen as he read, his pulse hammering in his ears.
It's creepy and it's weird that they never found out who it was. So they could be watching us now.
The letter went on, referencing their children in an eerie way. Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me. Shaken, Derek and Maria contacted the police, who took the letter seriously but had little to go on. The writer had left no fingerprints, no way to trace them. The Broadduses tried to move forward, dismissing it as an isolated incident, until another letter arrived. I see you have begun renovations. Why? It was perfect the way it was. The house is crying for the past.
To hear a story like that happening in Westfield, it's like, oh my God, what's going on,
I roam its halls, waiting for its second coming. Who was this person? A disgruntled former owner? A jealous neighbor? Or something even more sinister? Fear crept into every corner of their lives. They kept their children inside, installed cameras, and became prisoners in a house they hadn't even lived in yet. Then, another letter. Have they played in the basement yet? Or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. Derek and Maria began to suspect everyone. The kindly older couple next door, the man who jogged past every morning, the real estate agent who sold them the house. Was the Watcher one of them? Or someone they had never even seen? Paranoia took hold.
It's a little creepy, it's kind of like a weird energy, even just driving through.
The Broadduses hired private investigators, even consulted FBI agents. They combed through property records, analyzed handwriting, and studied security footage, but every lead turned into a dead end. The Watcher knew too much about their lives, their children, their house. Someone was watching, but from where? One evening, Derek sat in his car outside the house, watching the windows for movement. The street was dark, quiet, but inside, something was wrong. A shadow moved past an upstairs window, his breath caught in his throat. No one was supposed to be inside. He rushed in, his heart pounding. Room by room, he searched. Nothing. But the unease settled deep in his bones.
You think the series makes it look like a town full of murderous, crazy people? Yeah. It definitely does.
Was the Watcher already inside the walls, watching them watch back? Terrified and exhausted, they made a heartbreaking decision. They would never live in the home. It went up for sale, but the legend of the Watcher had spread. Potential buyers balked. The once dream home became a tainted property, an urban legend. Years passed. In 2019, another family finally moved in. And then, the letters stopped. Had the Watcher moved on? Had they been someone with a grudge against the Broadduses specifically? Or were they still out there, waiting for the right moment to return?
I feel that the police didn't really do their job. They should have done more.
The Broadduses never uncovered the identity of the Watcher, and the case remains one of the most chilling, unsolved mysteries in modern real estate history. To this day, theories circulate. Some believe it was a disturbed neighbor playing an elaborate prank, while others think the Broadduses themselves faked the letters in an attempt to get out of a financial burden. However, their fear was real. They spent years haunted by the idea that someone had been lurking in the shadows, watching their every move. Even after moving to another house in Westfield, the psychological scars remained. Derek admitted to experiencing sleepless nights, plagued by the memory of those letters. They had poured their dreams into 657 Boulevard, only for it to become the embodiment of their worst fears. And yet, the watcher was never caught. Whoever they were, they vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared. But does that mean they are truly gone? Perhaps the watcher never left. Perhaps they're simply waiting, watching, studying their next prey from an unseen vantage point. And somewhere, maybe from a window nearby, someone could still be watching, waiting for the right family to move in, waiting for their next letter to be sent, because houses don't forget, and neither do those who claim to watch over them. And with that unsettling tale, let's move on to our next disturbing story. The stalking of Isla Triquer. Isla Triquer had always prided herself on being independent. As a journalist, she had reported on crime, uncovered scandals, and traveled to the darkest corners of the world. But nothing could have prepared her for the terror that would unfold in her own backyard. It began subtly. A creak of the floorboards when she was home alone. A shadow lingering just beyond her garden gate. Small things that could be explained away.
He had climbed over the back wall and came in through my conservatory. I wear headphones, listen to podcasts, doing the work, so I got a bit of a fright. And he sort of says, "You haven't eaten, have you?"
But as the days passed, those small things became impossible to ignore. At first, Isla convinced herself it was paranoia. Living alone in a quiet neighborhood, it was easy for the mind to play tricks. But then she started noticing signs. Footprints in the damp soil beneath her windows, the feeling of being watched when she walked to her car, and worst of all, objects inside her home being moved ever so slightly. The hairbrush on her dresser, the cupboard door left open when she was sure she had closed it. The kind of details that made her stomach turn with a sickening realization.
And he'd come in before, he'd come in the front door, but the door was sometimes open, there's builders going in and out, so I was kind of... But still. It's not okay.
Someone had been inside her house. One evening, as Isla locked up for the night, she caught a glimpse of something that froze her in place. A figure standing just beyond the reach of her porch light. She barely made out the shape before it disappeared into the darkness. Her heart pounded. This was no accident. Someone was watching her, waiting. The police were called, but with no real evidence of a crime, there was little they could do. "Be careful," the officer had said, almost dismissively. Probably just a prankster. But Isla knew better. She felt it in her bones. Then things escalated. The sounds outside became more frequent. She would hear soft knocking on her windows at night, the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps on gravel. Her front door handle jiggled at odd hours. The sense of being hunted became suffocating. She tried to act normal, but her nerves were fraying. Determined to reclaim her sense of security, she installed security cameras and motion-activated lights around her property. For a few days, the eerie occurrences seemed to stop. But then, something far worse happened. One night, as she lay in bed, a notification buzzed on her phone. The security app had detected movement. With a shaking hand, she opened the live feed. The camera facing her back door showed nothing at first, just the swaying of tree branches in the wind. But then, out of the shadows, something emerged. A man. Dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by the hood of his jacket, he stood just outside her back door, unmoving, just watching. The sight sent a wave of pure dread through her. She could barely breathe as she saw him reach out, his hand grazing the doorknob, testing it. And then, the worst part, he looked up, directly into the camera, and smiled. Isla didn't wait to see what happened next. She dialed 911 with trembling fingers, whispering into the phone as she locked herself in the bathroom. The operator stayed on the line until she heard the wail of approaching sirens. By the time the police arrived, the intruder was gone, leaving nothing behind but muddy footprints on the patio. This time, the officers took her seriously. They promised increased patrols, but the fear had already burrowed deep into Isla's mind. She wasn't safe. The following day, she decided to leave town, staying with a friend in a more populated area. But even then, she felt uneasy, as though eyes followed her every move. Every dark alley, every sudden noise sent her heart racing. She barely slept, her mind replaying the chilling sight of that man standing outside her door. And then, the letters began. Handwritten, unsigned, always delivered without a trace. I see you. You can't run from me. You belong to me now. One night, her phone rang at 3 a.m. She answered, her voice barely above a whisper. Silence. And then, slow breathing on the other end. She hung up, her hands shaking, but the phone rang again immediately. She didn't answer. She barely slept for the rest of the night. The police launched an official investigation, revealing that Isla's stalker had been watching her for months, even before she had noticed. They eventually caught her neighbor. He had installed cameras, watched her through cracks in the fence, and even managed to break into her home without being caught. A man with no prior connection to her, someone she had never met. A stranger who had built an obsession from a distance, fueled by her public presence and the illusion of knowing her. But even after his arrest, the fear never truly left. Isla moved to a new city, changed her routines, and withdrew from the public eye. But the scars of being hunted, of being seen as prey, lingered. Even now, late at night, she sometimes wakes with a start, convinced she hears the soft creak of a floorboard or the rustle of movement outside her window. Convinced that somewhere in the shadows, someone is still watching. Now, let's move on to our next terrifying tale. The Catacomb Neighbor. Los Angeles is a city of dreams, but for Mark and Lisa Reynolds, it became a waking nightmare. They had just moved into a charming old house on the outskirts of the city, a fixer-upper with a rich history, and as they would soon discover, dark secrets hidden beneath the foundation. It started with sounds. In the dead of night, they would hear faint scratching beneath the floors, whispers so soft they almost dismissed them as tricks of the mind. Then came the missing items. Keys vanishing from their hooks, shoes misplaced, cupboards slightly ajar in the morning. Lisa joked about a mischievous ghost, but Mark couldn't shake the growing unease settling over their home. Then, one evening, while fixing a leaking pipe in the basement, Mark noticed something unusual. A draft seeping through what should have been a solid wall. Curious, he knocked on the surface. It sounded hollow. With growing anxiety, he grabbed a hammer and chipped away at the plaster, revealing something that sent a chill down his spine, an old, rusted metal door, locked from the outside. Lisa joined him as he forced the door open, revealing a narrow stone passage leading downward, deeper into the earth. The air was thick and stale, filled with a damp, rotten smell. Their phone flashlights barely penetrated the darkness as they stepped inside, their footsteps echoing eerily. The tunnel stretched on, winding like a snake beneath the property. Old bones littered the floor, animal bones, Mark told himself, though he wasn't entirely sure. Then they found the room. It was a small, candle-lit chamber, lined with ancient brick. Against one wall was a bed, dirty, unkempt, recently used, and beside it, a pile of notebooks, scrawled with frantic handwriting. Lisa picked one up and gasped. Page after page, it detailed their lives, when they left for work, what time they slept, their daily routines. The words, "You belong to the tunnels now," were repeated obsessively across the final pages. The sound of movement made them freeze. From the shadows, a figure emerged. A man, thin and ragged, his eyes wild with hunger and something else, something darker. He had been watching them, living beneath them. and now he was no longer content with staying hidden. Mark grabbed Lisa's hand and ran. The man gave chase, his bare feet slapping against the cold stone. The tunnels twisted and turned, disorienting them, but somehow they found their way back to the metal door. Mark slammed it shut just as the stranger lunged, his fingers scraping against the metal with an inhuman screech. They bolted upstairs, barricading the basement door and calling the police. Authorities arrived within minutes, but when they searched the tunnels, the man was gone. The bed, the notebooks, everything remained, but there was no trace of the intruder. The passages extended far beyond their property, an underground labyrinth beneath the city, its origins unknown. The Reynolds moved out the next day, unable to shake the feeling that the man was still watching, still waiting in the dark. But the nightmares didn't stop. Lisa woke in the middle of the night, convinced she heard whispering from the vents. Mark swore he saw movement in their rearview mirror as they drove away from their old home. Months later, curiosity got the better of Mark. He scoured records, trying to understand what lay beneath their house. He found only fragmented reports, mentions of old prohibition tunnels, disappearances, strange sightings, and one article, decades old, about a family who once lived at the same address. They had vanished without a trace, their belongings left untouched. The only clue? A note left behind, written in a frantic hand. We were never alone. The tunnels belonged to him. The Reynolds tried to move on, but the paranoia lingered. Every creak of their new home, every shadow in the corner of their vision, made their hearts race. And beneath the streets of Los Angeles, the tunnels remain, untouched, undisturbed. But in the dead of night, some say you can still hear whispers drifting up from the depths, whispers of a neighbor who never truly left. And with that chilling story, we come to the end of our terrifying tales. But remember, sometimes the scariest monsters aren't lurking in the dark. They're the ones who already know your name, who wave at you from across the street, who stand just outside your door at night, listening, waiting,